Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my subscribers. My new subscribers, welcome aboard. Um, I had said that I was going to be doing a series called White Lies, True Black History. And my purpose for this series that I'm doing is to educate. Um, you know what I'm saying? As YouTubers, we can't always, and as Black people, we can't always be looking for something to entertain us or the biggest, hottest, newest topics. Sometimes we need to learn. Sometimes we need to educate ourselves. And so I said I was going to be doing this series for the very purpose to help us reprogram our mindsets because I think that a lot of times as blacks, some of our low self-esteem and our identity crisis about how we look and who we are, it gets us down and it depresses us because of this false narrative that we've been given about where we come from. All of these false narratives about Africa. And I'm not going to lie, for many years, even up until adulthood, when somebody would say the word or say the name Africa or mention the continent of Africa, images that would come to my mind are images of poverty, destitution, black babies with flies, flying around them, dirty water, and those sorts of things. That's the type of narrative that we've been fed and that actually that narrative is a part of Western culture and Western society. Like if you're a part of the Western culture and Western society, most likely when someone mentions Africa or we speak about Africa, that's the image that will come to your mind or those are the type of associations that you will have with the continent. And if those narratives are just not true and they aren't accurate, we always want to be made to believe that Africans were nothing, that they were heathens, that they were so uncivilized until they met the West. And in many circumstances and in many cases, as I go through this series, you will see that it's not true. And if you haven't checked out my part one series, which I haven't got a lot of views on that one, but you will see how Africans are the ones who, not only to this day, because we built the prospective countries that we all live in, but even before we met Europeans and before we came to build their countries, we were quite successful and wealthy and doing well in our own nations. So I'm just asking you, brother and sister, to please watch um, this presentation that I'm doing. Please watch it with me and just learn and start to reprogram your mind about how you think the continent that our original people come from or where we come from, how it really was. And I actually haven't done a PowerPoint presentation in a while, so everyone just bear with me and let's go ahead and get into this information. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Please like this video. I have other videos on my channel that are more of an entertaining, more of a up-to-date news standpoint, some older stories. I talk about all sorts of different things. So you can check me out, Blacklight. That's my channel. Right now, I'm about to go ahead and get into my presentation, and I hope that you will all watch it and go through it with me. Thank you. So first off, Mansa Musa was the world's richest man, and what did he do? So that's the first thing that I would like to debunk the myth that all Africans or most Africans were so poor and destitute. The richest man to ever walk this world, known, put on paper, is Mansa Musa, which is an African. And anything I'm saying, it can be Googled and researched. And I'm also going to have some what they call resources or whatever to back up what I'm saying. because I don't want anybody just thinking I'm making these things up. So everything I'm saying, it's very researchable. But Mansa Musa, which was African, was the richest man known. Historians, scientists, all of that to ever exist. So just by that alone, we know that there were spaces and places plenty in Africa. In fact, this man actually conquered like 24 um, countries around Africa, and he was in control of those. So we know, and this is we're talking like back in the periods before 1300. Mansa Musa took on his power in the 1300s, but the country of Mali was already had already been established um, prior to him ruling. But Mansa Musa was born here in the red area. This red area that we're looking at is called Mali. It's a country in West Africa, and it actually is the eighth largest country in Africa. And this is the empire where Mansa Musa uh, ruled. Something else interesting is Mansa. See, this is something I learned while I was doing my little research. I actually thought that his name was Mansa Musu, but it's not. Mansa actually means ruler or king. And I'm not sure now, this right here is just a little guess, but Mansa, it reminds me of the word massa. So I'm not sure if there's a correlation there, not between how African Americans you used to use the word massa or you used to be told to call the white man massa or not, but there definitely is a close proximity in the terms between Mansa and Musa, which, like I said, Mansa means ruler and or king. And I actually misspelled that wrong, y'all. It's Mansa. So I'm so sorry. That's kind of unprofessional, but you have to excuse me for um that misspell right there. But yeah, this is where he was born. The richest man that walked this earth, according to historians, scholars, etc., was in West Africa. The main things that made Mali so rich were the fact that they did gold mining. And this is according to Geographic Society National. And gold mining and salt, ivory were some of the main things that caused this country to gain its wealth. And they would do trading within the continent between North and South with one another. They would also do trading outside of the continent, but they did a lot of trading amongst each other. And Mali had a lot, the majority of the gold and a majority of the salt there. And they would trade it, and they were known to that. And another source that you can look up is not only according to National Geographic, but also mining.com and the India Times will also show you that this bought 400 made Mansa Musa $400 billion um, net worth. This is just some information right here. Now imagine that. Now we all know big names like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. When we hear those names, we automatically know that we're talking about big money here, big money, big time spenders, big time rollers, big influencers. So imagine the amount of power and economic power that Jeff Bezos have and Bill Gates have, and then imagine it says right here, and this is according to Jonathan Turley, an article that he did. He was comparing the wealth of Bill Gates to that of Oh, maybe I did spell right. Mansa Musa, and Bill Gates is only worth $136 billion. Jeff Bezos was actually the closest one to come to um, this African black man's wealth, which sits at about 150 billion dollars. And like I said, I put some sources in here so that way if you guys want to look them up, check them out, then you can. But Mansa Musa was known for giving to the poor, and he was, like I said, the richest man um, on this planet, which was a black man, which was African. And we have to think about all the things that come with being the richest man in the world. Like, think of the power, the influence, the lifestyle, how you lived to be the richest man. So think how Jeff Bezos is living. Think about how Bill Gates is living. And then imagine having over twice that amount of money, power, and influence. So these people weren't running around, not only Mansa Musa, but the people in his community are running around um, clothesless and starving and hungry and with dirty water, etc. And I really hope that y'all watch my first part series, because in that video, it gives some of the exact same false narratives that's been given to where blacks needed Europeans when it's actually vice versa. Now, this is how rich this man was, to let you know that this man was not poor. He took a trip to Mecca in 1324, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica. Um, canvas.library.northwestern.edu. He had 60,000 people in his entourage, 60,000 men, including a personal entourage that persons of 1,200 enslaved, all dressed in silk and brocade. Now, just imagine, and these weren't slaves like the slaves that we think of over here in the United States. See, this is something else that people get mixed up when we always want to hear these people just comment. You know, other people had slavery, other people owned slaves, other people. The slavery that most people had in older cultures, and if you study it in African culture, is nothing like the slavery that took place here in the United States. And that's why when I hear people say, well, Africans sold slaves and sold them into slavery, Africans had no idea of the ideology and what slavery was going to mean for blacks in the United States of America. Because over there on the continent, slavery is okay, you're going to work for me, you're going to work, I'm going to feed you. And I'm sure that they didn't always weren't nice to their slaves, but there was a humanity still, because they even had slaves in the Bible, and the Bible even talks about how you're supposed to treat a slave. So it's not the fact of slavery, it's how slaves were treated. And when Africans were selling other Africans into slaves or other blacks into slavery, they had no idea of the ideology or the what Europeans were going to be doing, and their ideology of what slavery was, which we know what their ideology of slavery was, but that wasn't what in most cultures slavery was. And you can check it out for yourself. But slavery in most countries or cultures was not what Europeans mode of slavery was. But anyway, his slaves were decked out in silk and brocade, and they were adorned with gold, and they carried gold staffs. And mind you, Mansa Musa, he had one of the largest empires, according to the Encyclopedia of Britannica at this time. So imagine, see, this is what I'm trying to tell you. It's just such a false narrative because only the pictures they want to show and the only pictures that they want to tell us over here in the West are the ones of the tribes or show you the images of the people that may have not been a part of these larger societies or whatever. But this isn't all of Africa. This man, and this is back in the 1300s. Before the 1300s, Mansa Musa took it over and expanded, but this was already a wealthy, established empire before Mansa Musa took it over. He had one of the largest empires. Now, when we think of largest empires, you have to put yourself in the mind frame of like the United States of America, like Russia, like China, like these large empires. So actually, Mansa Musa in his era, he was like the could be considered like the United States of America. Just like United States of America is considered the wealthiest nation, he had um, one of the largest, and he actually had the wealthiest nation. He was a giver, and he believed in giving to the poor. On this trip, he actually was taking a trip to Mecca, and he actually crashed the Egyptian economy because this is how much gold. Now, when we think of crashing the economy, we can compare it to um, maybe similar to like inflation or the value of the dollar when it goes down. Because this man had so much gold that he crashed, and we already know I'm gonna be doing something on Egypt as well because we've been brainwashed. Even though Egypt is on the continent of Africa, for some reason, everybody want to believe that Egyptians were white or more Caucasian looking, when it's pretty much common sense that Africans from south migrated up north, up towards Egypt, and so the original Egyptians clearly were dark, so or people of darker color or but that's not. I'm gonna get into that at a later date, but they said that his entourage was so long that you just imagine when you look and you see something so far that you can't even see the end of it, but it just keeps getting smaller and smaller, almost like tunnel vision. That's how large his entourage was. And so when he would be traveling and going through all these different places, then he would stand out and people would recognize him. And because of that recognition, he was put on um, the Catlin Atlas, which was one of the first forms of maps created. I do believe that this was created by some Europeans. And because of his wealth and because of um, this lavish lifestyle and this lavish group of people, they added him on this map. They said first he also had 80 camels, each carrying 300 pounds of gold. He had horses, of course. Now we got to think about that. Camels and horses were the equivalent of our cars and vehicles today. So this man had like 80 vehicles, and that's just what he had with him just on this trip alone. One second, Shaw. Something else I want to say here. Okay, and just imagine having the money to be able to build. He built a mosque every single Friday. And you have imagine having the amount of money to where you could build a building every single Friday. Now this don't this, see this is what I'm saying. Like we have to open up and start studying and start listening to stuff like this so we can start reprogramming ourselves and start thinking of ourselves highly and knowing where we come from. When they say we come from kings and queens, it's not no lie. Not no lie that we come from kings and queens and we come from kingdoms that were prosperous. Like in my other video, I talk about how the Moors are the ones who helped transform Europe. After Europe went through all that it was going through, economy crashing, as we see, I don't know what it is about Europeans, but if you study their history, they always sick. I don't know what it is about it, but they always sick. There's always something going on with a pandemic or something, and we even see that here today. Ain't no other countries in this world suffer more from the coronavirus and now the monkey virus than the West. So I don't know what it is about them or whatever, but when you start studying, doing research on different things, you always see these people always sickly and sick and stuff, dying from pandemics and diseases or whatnot. I don't know what's up with that. But since I've been doing this little research thing, I'm like, dang, every time you turn around, it's like the same thing. You're sick, dying. Somehow they meet up with some group of Africans, whether it's the Moors, whether it's the Malian people or whatever. But they always end up taking from us or whatever and getting on and whatnot, and we help them. If you watch my first part series, you'll see how the Moors went over into Europe. These people didn't even know how to have running water and stuff like that. These African Moors went over there and showed they had lamps and schools, and we about to see the same thing right here with Mansa Musa. Like the African continent had it going on. Like I'm not understanding. Well, they knew what they was doing. They gave us a narrative, but it's so much documentation, just so much history on all the great things and all the riches and the wealth and just the lavish lifestyles and the architecture. I mean, you can go look at it and see it for yourself how Africans really lived, and it's just not this slummy image that they try to portray to us and to the world and to other people who haven't studied and don't know, you know, all about it. But yeah, they put him on this map. And I'm gonna be honest, to be honest with you, I'm not sure if the map was a setup because I like what you want to say that they put him on this map so that way they could know where he was at, so that way they could go attack him um, whenever they wanted to. Anyway, they took this map and they presented him. Okay, article I was reading, it says Europeans in the Mediterranean added them to their map depicting Mansa Musa with a gold crown and a gold nugget. Now that's a gold nugget in that man's hand. That's a gold nugget. Like I said, even the lowest people on the cascade, because they did have sets up of government were the slaves, and he had them dripped out and draped out in silk and brocade and gold. Come on now. And this is something that was really important to me. See, this is what I want us to really know. We were not just these dumb, ignorant, uneducated group of people. And it's still probably going to be hard for some of us to grasp this. That's why we have to keep hearing it. We have to keep listening to it. We have to reprogram our minds. We have to reprogram our minds because we can look at it and see it and still will not want to believe it. But all this can be looked up. Now, this right here, besides wealth, Mali was known for education. Right here in this picture that we're looking at, this is a picture of the University of Sankore, which still stands to this very day. When they already had educational facilities and schools, education was already important in Mali, but during Mansa Musa's trip to Mecca, he met other Muslim scholars and architects and brought them back to Mali. See, this is what I'm saying. Like, check that out. He met other scholars and architects. Now think about that. We have to think about that. He brought back scholars and architects. So how, if all the Africans are so dumb and so poor and so heathenish and such savages, he was bringing back scholars and architects to help build this school that we're looking at now. This is Sankore University, which still stands today in Timbuktu. Mansa Musa, he created one of the largest libraries of the time. That means over Europe, France, Britain, he had the largest libraries at the time with over 400,000 manuscripts. Now, check this out. How are all the Africans on the continent so illiterate? But you can go Google this right now and search, and it'll tell you that this man had the largest library in the time with over 400 manuscripts. And then check this out. Not only that building right there, that building is an actual university that was built in his time period, right? Check that building out. That's something that was built back then. And more or less it was a college because students would travel from around the world to attend because they were such known for education and for scholarly information and for scholars that people actually traveled there to learn. People traveled to Africa to learn. People traveled to Africa to get educated. And then this was something that was kind of shocking to me that I was really proud of. He even had a diploma program. Like people would go to different schools, not only the University of Sankore, because he had many, many schools and many, many libraries. In fact, education was so important in Mali that this is something that I think kind of reflects here in the United States, how you would see people who have libraries in their homes. Africans in Mali, education was so important to them that they had libraries inside of their homes. This is before the West. This is before they met Europe, before they had any entanglement with Europe. This is all Africans doing this on their own without their hand, without the help of anybody else, doing gold mining, doing salt mining, doing trade, making money off of it, becoming wealthy, building institutions, architecture. This is all by themselves. And I do believe that Africa is going to wake up one day and realize, look, we didn't need y'all from the beginning. We don't need y'all now, and go back to where they were and get that back. Because once you can do it, you can do it again. I mean, it's in you. God already blessed them with resources, the gold. I mean, we still seeing to this day in the news where they're finding large deposits of gold. And that's why all these countries over there, China, Europe, and all these people ain't over in Africa because they're trying to help break up African tribal wars and because they're trying to do this, do that. They're doing that because they still know that Africa still holds the major, and it's still, I mean, you can Google this to this day. Africa still holds the most largest resources, and it's not just gold. It holds resources to build Cadillac converters that run cars and they have I want to think it's called not uranium. I can't really, maybe it is uranium, but they have so many resources that everyone else needs to this day. If they will only get back to where they were in the beginning, where they didn't have anyone, and realize we can mine our own gold, we can mine our own salt, we can mine our own resources, we can trade amongst each other. Um, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, people used to around the world used to come to Africa. Now you look at it, people don't even want to respect African education. And the same thing with in my first part series, they were Africans, the Moorish Africans were big on education. That was something that they brought into Europe was education as well. I just don't understand how this narrative just got flipped. Well, I do know how, but I'm just saying, like, how did we start believing it? So they were known for big time education. Like I said, they even had programs where he would give people certificates and different rewards when they would complete a program, which is very similar to what we see today with colleges and universities. During the time of Mansa Musa, um, between 1347 and 1351, Europe was experiencing war with one another and suffering from disease. This was the time that the Black Death, this was called the Black Death, what they were going through, which was a pandemic. And the Black Death had wiped out a third of the European population. Europeans during this time had greater worries than education. And so the same thing in my first part series you would see. In fact, the Moors used to call them, it's a term that I can't think of, but the term meant like they were like ignorant or uneducated. And at this time with the Malians, it was the exact same way or the exact same thing. The Europeans at this time, they didn't have time to worry about education and building schools and building libraries because they're in the middle of a war where they're tearing each other down. And then not only on top of that, and they're going through a pandemic, um, which is also referred to as the bubonic plague between 1347 and 1351. So they didn't even have time to be sitting up. See, that's what I'm trying to show you the contrast of what we're being told and what reality really was. Now, we over in Africa living our best life, living in luxury, living in wealth, technology advances, running water, running pools, even set up how to have lights at night and all these other things that weren't even being done in Europe yet. So we were already advanced and past them in so many ways as far as with education and technology. I mean, we had paved streets before they had paved streets. In my first part series video, they said that the biggest, one of the biggest homes in Europe would be considered like a shack to the Moors, to the way that the Moors, African Moors live. Just to put it in perspective for you. But anyway, so they didn't have time to dedicate to education, reading, and writing. So therefore, they were more illiterate um, in this time frame. So, like I said, I'm doing this series just because I want us to start reprogramming our minds about where we come from, the people we come from, so that way we can hold our head up proudly and with pride when we say that we're African American. When we speak about the continent of Africa, be something that we're proud about. Africans have been pioneers on this globe. And I say this over and over again, I'm gonna keep on saying it. Europeans saw, it's not that we were so dumb and so animalistic and just so barbaric and such savages. It's what they seen that we could do over there on that continent. They seen the architecture, they seen the fabulous lifestyles that we were living. They seen the education, they seen the organization and structure. I mean, they even had government. They already had government in Mali. Like the setup, they already had government. Like the Mansa was like the president, could be considered the president or the king or ruler. And then they had different areas divided into provinces led by a furba, or which would be considered a government official. Furba, or you can call it a government official. And then they even had economic levels. Like everybody wasn't rich, everybody wasn't wealthy in Africa, but you better believe it's just like the United States. Once you're so rich, your poorest person is only going to be doing so bad. But in Mali, they did have different economic levels. At the top were farmers because they produced food. Now we got to think back in this time and era. Right now, we may not look at a farmer as being such a prestigious job, or such a prestigious position. But in the 1300s, being a farmer was definitely a very prestigious and a very important job because you were a part of feeding and making sure that the people got fed. So at the top of the economic scale were farmers because they produced food. Then we had our fishermen. Then we had our scribes. They even had civil servants. So they even had civil servants. And then you had your soldiers. See, they had military. They had military. Like it just blows my mind, like the depiction that they give and where reality really was. These people even had soldiers, and then at the bottom of the list, of course, were the slaves. So, like I said, I'm gonna be doing other series and continue to do other series or whatnot. Um, White Lies, True Black History. I'll probably be doing another one in a couple weeks. In the meantime, in between time, I'll be doing other regular videos. And once again, that's going to be all for now. Everything I said on here, please feel free to check it out, Google it, research it for yourself, and that's going to be all.